Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into a pretty explosive story, really. It comes from a YouTube video.
Yeah, the title translates roughly to Canada, severing ties with the U.S. New Prime Minister Carney declaring a trade war. It's from a channel called 9PAT LAM GIU.
Quite the headline. So, our mission here is to unpack that claim, look at the events and the potential shifts in Canada-U.S. relations, at least as this video presents them.
It's a dramatic starting point, isn't it? This idea of such a huge break between allies who've been, well, historically so close.
Exactly. And the video dives straight into what it calls the election shock.
Right, Mark Carney, unexpectedly becoming Liberal leader, then winning the election.
Yeah, and most people would know him from finance, right? Governor of the Bank of Canada, then the Bank of England. Serious global finance background.
Which is interesting. I mean, how does that deep financial expertise translate to, political leadership? It's different. The video does stress he's an outsider, not from the usual political path.
Maybe that was the appeal. The video suggests Canada was facing a lot of problems back then. Slow economic growth, inflation creeping up, unemployment worries, consumer confidence down, just a tough economic climate.
Yeah, paints a picture of a nation really struggling.
And that kind of economic worry, well, it can definitely open the door for someone promising big changes.
And the video positions Carney exactly like that.
Yeah.
As, a strategic mind who could tackle these economic issues, maybe differently than usual.
Then there's the U.S. relationship, specifically under President Trump, which the video really zeroes in on as a key factor.
Those protectionist tariffs.
Exactly. Steel, lumber, agriculture, even tech. The video argues that really damaged relations.
And that public anger over those tariffs, according to the source, was a big driver behind Carney's win. People wanted someone to, stand up for Canada's economy.
That feeling, that economic nationalism, it's potent stuff.
Oh, definitely. When your biggest trading partner starts putting up barriers that hurt your industries, well, people demand a strong response.
So let's drill down a bit more on Carney himself. The video really plays up his influence in global finance, those big central bank roles. He steered things through crises.
He certainly has that reputation.
Yeah.
But, as the video notes, and it's important, he didn't have that traditional political background, no elected office before this.
Right. Leading a country, it's not quite the same as running a central bank, is it? Different skills involved, politics, diplomacy.
Though his early career at Goldman Sachs, well, that gave him international exposure and connections. Different perspective, maybe, but still valuable.
And his time at the Bank of Canada during the 2008 crisis is presented really positively, like his policies helped Canada get through it relatively okay.
And then at the Bank of England, dealing with the UK debt crisis, Brexit, more high-stakes economic management added to his reputation.
The video also mentions his work on sustainable finance. That's interesting.
Yeah, pushing for green finance, thinking about climate change and the economy together. That suggests maybe a longer-term view that might resonate with people now.
Okay, so this is where the video says things really escalate. The Canada should be the 51st state thing.
Yes. Apparently, it starts with Trump putting that huge 25% tariff on Canadian cars.
Which is a massive deal for Canada's economy. The auto sector is huge.
Absolutely, a direct hit. And then, the video claims, Trump made that comment about Canada maybe becoming the 51st state.
Wow. You can just imagine the reaction to that in Canada.
Oh, I'd expect a massive backlash.
Yeah.
An affront to sovereignty, national pride, especially hitting the auto sector like that.
And the video says that's exactly what happened. Widespread public anger, people rallying around Canadian independence.
And Carney apparently jumped on that.
Yeah, the video portrays it as a strategic move, capitalizing on the anti-Trump feeling, positioning himself as the defender of Canada, protecting sovereignty, protecting the auto industry.
That makes political sense. Tapping into that strong national feeling, presenting yourself as the protector against an outside threat. It often works.
So according to this video, Carney wins, and his victory speech is, well, a game changer.
What did he supposedly say?
It claims he declared an end to Canada's economic dependence on the U.S., said Canada needed self-determination, its own independent economic path. That's a huge statement.
A declaration of independence, economically speaking.
Yeah.
Wow. That really would signal a massive shift. acknowledging the past reliance, but saying it's just not viable anymore.
But how realistic is that really for an economy so intertwined like Canada's?
That's the big question, isn't it? True self-reliance is incredibly difficult. There'd have to be major trade-offs.
The video stresses this idea of national self-reliance, making decisions based on internal strength, not external pressure, building diverse relationships, not just relying on the U.S.
Focus on internal innovation, entrepreneurship. It's not total isolation, the video says, but partnerships based on equality.
Which, fits with what other countries are trying to do to diversify, reduce vulnerability. Building up domestic capacity is key for resilience.
Definitely. So after this declaration, what's the next step, according to the video?
A grand restructuring, a big pivot towards the east.
Eastward.
Yeah.
Towards Asia and Europe.
Exactly. The claim is Canada's long-term strategy is to become a bridge between North America and Asia-Europe using its geography.
That's ambitious, really ambitious. It implies massive infrastructure investment, doesn't it? Ports, rail, energy, digital.
Yep. The video talks about strengthening ties in trade, investment, science, tech, culture, education with both regions, developing that transcontinental infrastructure.
And leveraging existing trade deals.
Right. Bolstering things like CETA with the EU and the CPTPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, investing heavily in high-tech innovation, attracting talent, research collaboration. It's a whole package.
Okay, so CETA gives access to the huge EU market. CPTPP links Canada with fast-growing Asia-Pacific economies like Japan, Australia.
Yeah.
Those are definitely tools for diversification.
So while all this is supposedly happening, how does the U.S. react in this narrative?
Well, the video says Trump kept up the provocative talk, even repeated the idea of Canada joining the U.S.
Which, you can guess, didn't go over well.
No. The video claims strong condemnation from Canadian politicians, all parties, and the public just digging in on independence and sovereignty.
And it probably just fueled that nationalist feeling even more.
You'd think so. Highlighting those stark differences in style and viewpoint between the leaders, between the countries at that moment.
And it really forced a debate in Canada, didn't it, about what that relationship with the U.S. should look like, how important sovereignty is, raising big questions about the future.
Yeah, a period like that could really reshape how the two countries interact long-term, across the board, trade, security, everything.
Okay, let's shift to what the video says Carney's new government focused on initially.
First things first, apparently, building a strong, capable team.
Right. Careful cabinet picks competence, integrity, and emphasizing working with Parliament, discussing reforms.
That focus on competence and collaboration makes sense for any new government, especially one planning big changes. You need buy-in.
The video mentions proposed reforms, social policies aimed at improving quality of life, reducing inequality, standard goals, perhaps. But interestingly, it says while the U.S. relationship is still a priority, the approach is now more strategic, carefully weighing the pros and cons in any negotiation.
So cautious.
Yeah.
Calculated. Acknowledging the U.S. importance, but putting Canada's specific interests first.
And developing a much more flexible, multifaceted foreign policy, building ties beyond the U.S. long-term national development plans, improving quality of life.
Plus administrative reform, transparency, anti-corruption efforts mentioned too.
It all fits that narrative of charting a new, more independent course.
Definitely. A government trying to project competence, strategic thinking, and a focus on domestic well-being alongside this global shift.
And a core part of that outward shift, according to the video, is really leaning into those existing trade deals, CETA and CPTPP.
Using them as the main tools for market diversification, reducing that U.S. reliance.
Makes sense. CETA connects them to Europe's massive market, CPTPP to the Asia-Pacific. These are concrete pathways.
The video lists the benefits, access to millions of consumers. Fewer tariffs making Canadian goods cheaper there, more stable trade rules, protecting investments and ideas.
All aimed at making Canada less vulnerable if U.S. policy suddenly changes again. Building a more resilient export base, strengthening Canada's global standing. Plus, hoping these deals boost R&D and tech transfer.
Yeah, these agreements can be powerful engines for diversification and growth if leveraged effectively. Reduces the risk of having all your eggs in one basket, so to speak.
But the video is also realistic, it seems. It acknowledges the hurdles.
Like the fact that Canada's economy is already so deeply tied to the U.S.
Exactly. In key sectors, cars, oil, lumber, agriculture, you can't just flip a switch.
That integration is deep. It creates a lot of inertia. Changing those patterns takes serious, sustained effort. It's not quick.
And the video points to other challenges, too. Infrastructure gaps in Canada, needing tech upgrades, not enough domestic investment, relying on imports for high-tech gear.
Plus, finding new, major trade partners isn't always easy. Political issues, cultural differences, market demands, competition. It's complex.
The video actually says this whole reorientation could take decades.
Which sounds about right. It's a long-term project, needs consistent strategies, massive investment in industries, people, infrastructure, and you had to be adaptable.
The video also stresses things like environmental protection, social well-being during the transition, getting broad public buy-in, even changing mindsets to support domestic products.
That cultural shift towards buy Canadian, fostering that sense of national economic purpose, that's a huge piece of the puzzle too. Hard to engineer though.
Now, what about Carney's leadership style in all this? How does the video portray him?
It's very action-oriented, data-driven, strategic, experienced.
Making decisions based on research, analysis, long-term vision, someone reliable who follows through. That's the image.
It's that pragmatic, evidence-based approach, contrasted perhaps with more impulsive leadership styles, focusing on measured steps.
And his calmness, his transparency, the video claims that built trust, especially with the middle-class, moderate voters.
People may be tired of political drama.
Perhaps. The idea is focusing on sustainable policies with long-term benefits, not just quick fixes or emotional appeals. Politics as trust-building through responsible decisions.
That appeal to moderation and realism can definitely resonate. Clear explanations, grounded in facts, tend to build confidence.
So the video then lays out what it sees as Carney's main policy priorities.
Yeah.
5 key areas.
Okay, what are they?
First, economic self-reliance. Basically, executing that strategy, developing domestic industries, diversifying trade away from the U.S. towards Asia, Africa, Latin America. The goal, a diversified, independent, resilient economy.
Directly supports that eastward shift idea. Makes sense.
Second, stabilizing cost of living. Controlling prices for essentials, food, fuel, services, using various tools. Managing supply and demand, promoting competition, maybe taxes or subsidies to buffer shocks. Goal, better quality of life, social stability.
Cost of living is always a huge public concern. Any government would need to address that, especially during a big transition.
Third, tax and investment restructuring, making the tax system fairer, simpler, using incentives to get investment, domestic and foreign, into key areas like high-tech, renewables, creative industries, supporting small businesses too. Goal, more revenue, more innovation, more economic buzz.
Using tax and investment policies strategically to steer the economy towards those desired growth areas. Yeah. Pretty standard toolkit, but the focus is key.
Fourth, smart immigration reform, attracting high-skilled workers, tech, healthcare, education, research, but doing it in a controlled way. Focusing on integration, balancing development needs with national security and cultural concerns.
Immigration is always a delicate balance. Targeting skills while ensuring smooth integration is crucial for long-term success.
And fifth, strengthening multilateral trade relations. Actively building and maintaining free trade deals. EU, ASEAN, developing regions are mentioned. Protecting Canada's interests in global forums. Reducing trade war risks. Helping Canadian firms join global supply chains. Goal lights. More export markets, attracting investment and tech.
So doubling down on trade diversification through formal agreements and active international engagement reinforces the overall strategy again.
Then the video gets even more ambitious. It talks about a grand ambition, leading the G7.
Wow. So not just managing Canada's issues, but aiming for a global leadership role.
Yeah. Beyond just sorting out the trade spat with the U.S., the vision is for Canada to become a leader within the G7, building this comprehensive, competitive, sustainable economy.
That's aiming high. What steps does the video suggest?
Continuous policy reforms, economic, financial, trade, creating a transparent investment climate, better governance, big infrastructure spending, transport, IT, clean energy, community services.
So getting the fundamentals right.
Exactly. Plus, a massive push in tech and innovation, building a startup culture, high-tech, renewables, health, biotech, developing a highly skilled workforce through education and training.
Human capital is key.
And being active internationally, organizations, trade deals, global initiatives on sustainability, environment. Supporting small businesses is mentioned again, too.
It's a comprehensive vision for national development aimed at achieving that top-tier status. Requires sustained effort across many fronts.
Now, the video circles back to the U.S. relationship, framing it as learning from betrayal.
Betrayal, strong word.
Yeah, it explicitly talks about the feeling of being betrayed by a close ally, presumably the U.S., contrasting Canada's values of cooperation and loyalty with what happened.
That highlights the emotional toll these geopolitical shifts can take. Trust is fragile.
But the lesson learned, according to the video, isn't bitterness. It's the need for flexible foreign policy, avoiding over-reliance on any single country.
Being more cautious about strategic partnerships, maybe?
Seems so. Maintaining important relationships, but building new, more flexible ones too. Using that negative experience as motivation to strengthen Canada internally and externally.
A pragmatic response.
Yeah.
Learning, adapting, diversifying relationships, not just trade. Building resilience in diplomacy, too.
The video concludes by painting a picture of a changing world in independent Canada.
Moving beyond being just, quote, the shadow of the United States.
Exactly. Arguing the world is changing, demanding independent policies, Canada emerging as a nation shaping its own path, having its own voice, contributing globally.
Reinforces that core theme. Canada forging its own identity on the world stage.
It mentions Canada taking leadership on climate change, cybersecurity, human rights, sustainable development, sticking to international agreements like the Paris Accord.
Projecting itself as a responsible global citizen.
Pursuing an independent foreign policy, seeking peaceful solutions, not just following others' interests, focusing on science, tech, innovation, basically Canada's growing influence.
It's a narrative of national self-assertion and aiming for positive global influence.
So let's wrap up this deep dive into the video's narrative. We've seen this story of Mark Carney's rise, apparently driven by a backlash against U.S. protectionism and a promise of economic independence for Canada.
Followed by this dramatic declaration of a new direction looking east, diversifying away from the U.S.
With ambitious policy shifts aimed at restructuring the economy, society, and Canada's place in the world. Aiming for G7 leadership, even.
It's a bold vision presented in the video. A decisive pivot towards autonomy in a changing global landscape. That's the core message.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener. Thinking about just how tangled up the U.S. and Canadian economies really are, how deep those ties run. If a country tries to make such a big strategic shift, severing or lessening those long-standing links.
Yeah, what are the ripples? What are the unintended consequences, good or bad, that might not be obvious at first glance?
Exactly. What are those unseen effects when you try to fundamentally change such a core relationship? Something to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.